The sun hadn't bothered to rise properly yet, just bleeding orange across the horizon like a wound that wouldn't close. Caleb Rowan rode his horse steady through the scrubland, the animal's breath coming out in small clouds, despite the Arizona heat that would hit later. He'd been riding since before dawn, which was nothing new. Running a ranch the size of his meant sleep was a luxury he'd forgotten the taste of years ago. Behind him, two of his men followed. Tom Yates, who'd been with him since the beginning, and a newer hand named Derek, whose last name Caleb couldn't recall. Didn't matter much. What mattered was the $800 Gideon Mercer owed him, 6 months overdue now, and Caleb's patience had run dry as the creek beds in August. "You really think he's got the money, boss?" Tom asked, pulling his horse up alongside Caleb's. Tom was pushing 50, with a face like worn leather and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. "No," Caleb said flatly, "but I think he's got something." "Cattle? Maybe. Land deed, equipment, hell. I'll take whatever he's got that's worth something. Can't let debts slide, Tom. Word gets around that I'm soft. Every two-bit homesteader in the territory will think they can stiff me." Tom grunted his agreement. Derek said nothing, just kept his eyes forward like he was trying to prove something. Young kid, probably not even 25, still had that eager look like the West was going to make him into somebody instead of just grinding him down like everyone else. The Mercer homestead came into view about an hour later, and Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd been here once before, 3 years back when Gideon had first asked for the loan. The place had been struggling then, but at least it had looked like someone gave a damn. Now? The fences were half collapsed, the barn leaning like a drunk, and the main house looked ready to surrender to gravity. "Jesus," Tom muttered. "Place looks worse than I remember." "He's been drinking it away," Caleb said. Everyone knew Gideon Mercer had a problem with the bottle. Had for years, ever since his wife died. The question was whether he'd drunk away $800 worth of assets, or if there was still something salvageable here. They rode up to the house and dismounted. Caleb tied his horse to what was left of the hitching post and walked to the door, his boots heavy on the rotting porch boards. He knocked once, hard enough to make the door rattle in its frame. No answer. He knocked again. "Mercer, open up. We need to talk." Still nothing. Caleb glanced at Tom, who just shrugged. Derek's hand had drifted toward his pistol, which was stupid. Caleb shot him a look and the kid's hand dropped. "Gideon Mercer," Caleb's voice carried across the empty yard. "I'm not leaving until we settle this debt. You can do it the easy way or the hard way, but it's getting done today." Finally, movement inside. Shuffling footsteps, the sound of something being knocked over. The door opened a crack and Gideon's face appeared, eyes bloodshot and unfocused. He'd aged a decade since Caleb had seen him last. His hair was greasy, his beard unkempt, and he reeked of whiskey even from 3 feet away. "Rowan," Gideon slurred, "wasn't expecting you." "6 months overdue tends to bring me around," Caleb said evenly. "We gonna do this out here, or you gonna let me in?" Gideon hesitated, then pulled the door open wider. "Come on in then. But I gotta tell you, I don't have your money." "Yeah, I figured that much." Caleb stepped inside, Tom following. Derek stayed on the porch, probably grateful to be out of the conversation. The interior of the house was worse than the outside. Empty bottles littered every surface. The place smelled like stale alcohol, unwashed bodies, and rot. Caleb's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he saw the true state of things. Furniture broken or missing, holes in the walls, a general air of complete collapse. "Where's your daughter?" Caleb asked. He remembered Gideon mentioning a girl last time, though he'd never seen her. "Lila?" "She's around." Gideon waved a hand vaguely. "Look, Rowan, about that money." "I don't want to hear excuses," Caleb cut him off. "What have you got? Cattle? Equipment? Anything I can sell to recover the debt?" Gideon laughed, a bitter sound that turned into a cough. "Cattle? Hell, I sold the last of them 4 months ago. Drank through that money already. Equipment's all broken or sold off. There's nothing left, Rowan. Nothing but this rotting pile of wood and—" He paused, something shifting in his bloodshot eyes. "And Lila." Caleb went very still. "What?" "My daughter," Gideon said, his voice taking on a wheedling quality. "She's 18 now. Good worker. Pretty thing, too. When she's cleaned up. Worth more than $800, I'd say." The silence that followed felt like the moment before a gunshot. Caleb stared at Gideon, trying to process what he'd just heard. Beside him, Tom had gone rigid. "You're not saying what I think you're saying," Caleb said slowly. "I'm saying she's my asset," Gideon replied, gaining a sick kind of confidence. "You want something for your debt? Take her. She can work for you. Cook, clean, whatever you need. Hell, she's young and—" "Stop talking." Caleb's voice was flat and cold. "Right now." But Gideon, drunk and desperate and too far gone to recognize danger, kept going. "Look, I know how it sounds, but this is business, right? You need to recover your money. I need to clear my debt. She's worth something, at least, more than this damn place." He turned toward the back of the house and raised his voice. "Lila, get out here." Caleb's hands had curled into fists. Every instinct told him to walk out, to get on his horse and ride away from this nightmare. But he didn't move. Couldn't, somehow. Footsteps from the back room, light, hesitant, and then she appeared. The first thing Caleb noticed was how small she looked. Not in height. She was probably average, but in the way she held herself, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. Her dress was faded and patched, hanging loose on a frame that hadn't seen enough food in too long. Dark hair pulled back in a messy braid. But it was her face that hit him like a fist to the gut. She was covered in bruises. A dark purple one spread across her left cheekbone. Her lip was split, not quite healed. And her eyes? Hazel, he noted distantly, held a wariness that made her look simultaneously younger and much, much older than 18. "This is Lila," Gideon said, like he was showing off livestock. "Like I said, she's a good worker, strong enough despite how she looks. You take her, we'll call the debt even." Lila kept her eyes on the floor. She didn't speak, didn't react, just stood there like she'd learned a long time ago that making herself invisible was the safest option. Caleb felt something dark and furious rising in his chest. "No." "No?" Gideon blinked. "What do you mean, no? This is a good deal, Rowan. You're getting— I don't buy people," Caleb said, each word precise and hard as a hammer strike. "I'm a rancher, not a slaver. Whatever you've told yourself to make this seem acceptable, it's not." Gideon's face twisted. "Then what the hell do you want from me? I got nothing else." "You've got her," Caleb said, nodding toward Lila. "You're her father. You're supposed to protect her, not—" He stopped, trying to control his anger. "Not this." "Protect her?" Gideon laughed again, that same bitter sound. "With what? I can barely keep this place standing. At least with you, she'd have food, shelter. She'd be a slave." "She's an asset," Gideon's voice rose. "And if you won't take her, then I'll find someone who will. There's plenty of men who'd pay good money for a girl like her. Maybe not 800, but enough to get me through." That's when Caleb moved. Not consciously, not with any plan. One moment he was standing still, and the next his hand was clamped around Gideon's throat, slamming the older man back against the wall, hard enough to rattle the windows. "Boss!" Tom's voice, urgent. Caleb ignored him. He leaned in close to Gideon, whose eyes had gone wide with sudden fear. "You listen to me very carefully," Caleb said quietly. "You say one more word about selling your daughter, and I'll forget every law in the territory. You understand me?" Gideon couldn't speak, could barely nod. Caleb held him there a moment longer, then released him. Gideon slid down the wall, gasping. That's when Lila spoke for the first time. "Please don't hurt him." Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like a blade. Caleb turned to look at her and saw something that made his fury somehow worse. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid for Gideon. After everything, she was still trying to protect the man who'd just tried to sell her. Before Caleb could respond, Gideon got to his feet, his fear turning to rage. "You ungrateful little—" He backhanded Lila across the face, the crack of it sharp in the quiet room. She went down hard, catching herself on the floor with her hands. Didn't cry out, didn't make a sound. Just knelt there, one hand touching her face where the new bruise was already forming. Caleb saw red. He grabbed Gideon again, hauled him up, and hit him. Once, hard, right in the face. Gideon dropped like a stone and didn't get back up, just lay there groaning. The room went quiet except for Gideon's whimpering and Caleb's heavy breathing. Tom stood in the doorway, his expression grim. Lila was still on the floor, looking up at Caleb with those two old eyes. Caleb ran a hand over his face, trying to think. Every instinct told him to leave, to walk away from this mess. But if he did, what would happen to her? Gideon would sell her to someone else, someone who wouldn't have any problem with it. And given the kind of men who frequented the territory, that someone would probably be worse than he could imagine. "Get up," he said to Lila. His voice came out rougher than he intended. She flinched but obeyed, rising slowly to her feet. Still wouldn't look directly at him. Caleb turned to Tom. "Go find the territorial magistrate. Should be in town today. I saw the notice last week. Bring him here." "What are you thinking, boss?" Tom asked carefully. "I'm thinking we're going to do this legal," Caleb said. "No slavery, no ownership. But if she stays here, she's dead or worse within a month. So we do it the right way. A proper indenture contract. She works the debt off over time with wages and protection guaranteed by law." "You sure about this?" "No," Caleb admitted. "But I'm not leaving her here, and I'm not letting him sell her to someone else. So this is what we're doing." Tom nodded slowly, then headed out. Derek would stay, presumably to make sure Gideon didn't cause more problems. Caleb looked at Lila again. She was standing very still, like a deer trying to decide whether to bolt. "Did you hear what I said? About the indenture?" A small nod. "You understand what that means? You'd work at my ranch for a set number of years, 5 probably, to clear the debt. You'd get room and board, and I'd pay you a small wage on top of that. It's legal, it's binding, and at the end of it, you'd be free with money in your pocket. But you'd have to work. It's not easy on a ranch." "I can work," she said quietly. First full sentence he'd heard from her. "I'm sure you can." He paused, trying to figure out how to say the next part. I'm not him." He gestured at Gideon, still sprawled on the floor. "I'm not going to hit you, not going to touch you at all except as an employer to an employee. You'll have your own space, your own privacy. There are other women on the ranch. My cook, Rosa, she'll look after you. And my daughter, Molly. She's 7. You'll be safe there. You understand?" Another nod. But her eyes said she didn't believe him. Not really. Couldn't blame her for that. They waited in uncomfortable silence for Tom to return. It took almost 2 hours. Gideon regained consciousness about halfway through and started to protest, but one look from Caleb shut him up. Lila didn't move from her spot near the wall, didn't ask for water or food, just stood there like she'd learned to make herself invisible. Finally, hoofbeats outside. Tom returned with Magistrate Holloway, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and the perpetually tired expression of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's worst. "Rowan," Holloway greeted, stepping inside and immediately wrinkling his nose at the smell. "Tom here tells me you need a contract drawn up?" "Indenture agreement," Caleb confirmed. 5 years of labor to satisfy an $800 debt with guaranteed wages, room, and board. Holloway's gaze moved from Caleb to Gideon to Lila, and understanding crossed his face. He'd probably seen situations like this before. "And all parties are agreeable to these terms?" "I am," Caleb said. "She don't get a choice," Gideon muttered from the floor. "She's my daughter. She's 18, Holloway interrupted. Old enough to sign a contract on her own behalf. So yes, she does get a choice." He looked at Lila. "Young lady, do you understand what's being proposed here?" Lila's voice was steady despite everything. "I work for Mr. Rowan for 5 years. He pays me and gives me a place to stay. After 5 years, the debt is cleared and I'm free." "That's correct." "And you're agreeing to this of your own free will?" She glanced at her father, then back at Holloway. Something shifted in her expression. Not hope, exactly, but a kind of desperate calculation. "Yes, then let's make it official." Holloway pulled out the necessary paperwork from his satchel. He was prepared for this kind of thing. Indenture contracts weren't uncommon in the territory, though usually they involved families trying to get out of debt rather than whatever this was. The contract was drawn up right there on Gideon's broken table. Caleb read through it carefully, making sure the terms were clear. 5 years of labor, $50 per year and wages paid quarterly, room and board provided, and specific language about her rights and protections as an indentured worker. It wasn't perfect, but it was legal, and it was better than the alternative. Lila signed with a shaky hand. Caleb signed. Gideon, still nursing his split lip, signed last with obvious reluctance. "There," Holloway said, handing Caleb his copy of the contract. It's legal and binding. Miss Mercer is now in your employ until... He consulted the date. August 15th, 1887. Any violation of these terms can be brought before me or any territorial court. He gave Caleb a meaningful look. That goes both ways, Rowan. You abuse these terms and you'll answer for it. Understood, Caleb said. Holloway nodded, then turned to leave. He paused at the door and looked back at Lila. If you ever need anything, Miss Mercer, you know where my office is. Don't hesitate. She nodded, but didn't speak. After Holloway left, Caleb turned to Lila. Get your things. We're leaving. I don't have things, she said simply. Of course she didn't. He looked around the house again, at the complete squalor of it, and realized she probably had exactly what she was wearing and nothing else. Fine, we'll get you what you need in town. He started toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Gideon, still sitting on the floor like a broken puppet. If I see you at my ranch, if I hear you've been asking around about her, if you come within a mile of my property, I will make you regret it. Are we clear? Gideon just stared at him with dull, resentful eyes. I said, are we clear? Yeah, Gideon muttered. We're clear. Outside, the sun had fully risen, turning the desert into an oven. Tom and Derek had the horses ready. Caleb helped Lila up onto his horse. She moved like someone who wasn't used to riding, stiff and uncertain. He swung up behind her, keeping a careful distance. Hold on to the saddle horn, he told her. It's a few hours' ride. She gripped the horn with both hands, her knuckles white. Caleb nudged the horse into a walk, Tom and Derek falling in behind them. They rode in silence for the first hour. Lila held herself rigid, probably terrified of falling or touching him too much, or any number of things. Caleb kept his attention on the trail, trying not to think about what he'd just done. He'd taken responsibility for another person's life, someone damaged and scared and completely dependent on him now. What the hell was he thinking? We'll stop in town first, he said finally, more to break the silence than anything. Get you some proper clothes, some supplies, then we'll head to the ranch. It's a few hours past town. Okay, her voice was small. Rosa, that's my cook. She's going to help you get settled. And my daughter Molly, she'll be excited to meet you. She's at that age where she's curious about everything. Just fair warning. Lila didn't respond to that. Caleb let it drop. Town was Mesquite Flats, a dusty collection of buildings that served the surrounding ranches and homesteads. They stopped at the general store first. Caleb dismounted and helped Lila down, noting how she immediately stepped back from him, putting distance between them. Inside, the store owner's wife, Mrs. Chen, took one look at Lila and her expression shifted from friendly to concerned. Oh, honey, she said quietly. What do you need? Clothes, Caleb said. Work clothes, a couple of dresses, boots, whatever else a young woman needs. I'll pay for it. Mrs. Chen didn't ask questions, just nodded and led Lila toward the back where the ready-made clothing was kept. Caleb waited at the counter, aware of the stares from the other customers. Small towns. Everyone knew everyone else's business. Tom came up beside him. You know people are going to talk. Let them talk. They're going to say you bought yourself a girl. Then they're wrong, Caleb said flatly. I hired an employee to work off a debt. That's all. Tom didn't look convinced, but he dropped it. After about 20 minutes, Mrs. Chen emerged with Lila, who was now carrying a bundle of clothes. She'd also been given a quick wash, Caleb noticed. The worst of the dirt was gone from her face, though the bruises stood out even more now. I put it all on your account, Mr. Rowan, Mrs. Chen said, and I threw in some other things she'll need, hairbrush, soap, that sort of thing. Thank you. Caleb handed her some extra money. For your discretion. Mrs. Chen pocketed it with a knowing look. Honey, she said to Lila, you take care of yourself. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you come see me, understand? Lila nodded, clutching her bundle. They left town and headed west, toward the ranch. The landscape gradually shifted from flat scrubland to rolling hills, with mountains visible in the distance. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Caleb loved this land, had built his whole life on it. Now he was bringing someone into that life who'd been given no choice in the matter, not really. Some choice. Stay with your drunk father who beats you, or come work for a stranger for 5 years. What's it like? Lila asked suddenly. Your ranch? It was the first unprompted thing she'd said. Caleb took it as a good sign. Big. About 2,000 acres. We run cattle mostly, some horses. Got about 15 men working for me, plus Rosa, and a couple others who handle the domestic side. Main house is solid. I built it myself 7 years ago after my wife died. There's a bunkhouse for the single men, a separate cottage for Rosa, and you'll have a room in the main house. With your daughter. Near her, yes, I want Rosa close by too in case you need anything. Why? The question caught him off guard. Why what? Why do you care? Why not just... She trailed off. Why not just treat you like property, since that's what your father wanted, Caleb said bluntly. Because I'm not him. Because I was raised to believe people aren't things you own. And because I have a daughter, and if anything ever happened to me, I'd want someone to look after her the way I'm going to look after you. Lila was quiet for a long moment. She's lucky, she finally said. Your daughter. Maybe, maybe not. Her mother died in childbirth. She doesn't remember her at all. That's a kind of loss. At least she had you. Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The ranch came into view as the sun was starting to dip toward the western horizon. The main house stood solid against the landscape, 2 stories of wood and stone with a wide porch wrapped around the front. The barn was off to the left, the bunkhouse to the right. Corrals and fencing spread out in every direction, and Caleb could see his cattle grazing in the distance. This is it, he said. The Rowan Ranch. They rode up to the house and Caleb dismounted, then helped Lila down. She stood there looking around, and he tried to see it through her eyes, probably bigger and better kept than anything she'd known in years. The front door opened and Rosa appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a round woman in her 50s, with graying black hair and a face that could shift from stern to warm in an instant. Right now she looked curious. Caleb, she said. Then her eyes landed on Lila and her expression changed. Oh. Rosa, this is Lila Mercer. She's going to be working here for the next 5 years. I need you to help her get settled, show her around, make sure she has everything she needs. Rosa came down the porch steps, her eyes taking in Lila's bruises, her thin frame, the way she held herself. Of course, she said, her voice gentle. Come on, honey. Let's get you inside and fed. You look like you could use a meal. I'm okay, Lila started. Nonsense. When's the last time you ate a proper meal? Lila didn't answer, which was answer enough. Rosa made a clicking sound with her tongue and put a gentle hand on Lila's back, guiding her toward the house. Come on, we'll get some food in you, and then we'll talk about everything else. Caleb watched them go, Tom standing beside him. Well, Tom said, that's done. That's just the start, Caleb replied. Now comes the hard part. Actually figuring out how this is supposed to work. You'll figure it out, you always do. Caleb wasn't so sure about that, but he nodded anyway and headed toward the barn to deal with the horses. Work was always the answer when things got complicated. Inside the house, Rosa led Lila to the kitchen, which was warm and smelled like bread and stew. Sit, Rosa commanded, pointing at the table. Lila obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair like she might need to run at any moment. Rosa ladled out a generous bowl of stew and set it in front of her along with a thick slice of bread. Eat, she said, then busied herself with other tasks, giving Lila space. Lila picked up the spoon, her hand shaking slightly. The first bite was cautious, then she ate faster, like she couldn't help herself. Rosa pretended not to notice, just kept working, occasionally glancing over to make sure the girl was all right. So, Rosa said after a few minutes, Caleb said you'll be working here. Lila nodded, her mouth full. What kind of work did you do before? She swallowed. Everything, cooking, cleaning, tending animals, whatever needed doing. Well, there's plenty of that here. But we'll take it slow at first, let you get your strength back. You're all skin and bones, honey. No offense. None taken. Lila finished the stew and looked at the empty bowl like she was surprised it was gone so fast. Want more? I shouldn't... That wasn't a question. Here. Rosa filled the bowl again. You eat until you're full, understand? We don't starve people in this house. Lila ate the second bowl slower, and by the end of it, some of the tension had left her shoulders. Rosa poured her a cup of water and sat down across from her. Now, Rosa said, her voice kind but firm, I'm going to tell you how things work around here, and I want you to listen carefully. Caleb Rowan is a good man. He's fair, he's honest, and he doesn't tolerate disrespect toward anyone who works for him. You'll work hard here, that's expected, but you'll be treated right. You have your own room, your own space, and nobody touches that without your permission. The ranch hands know better than to cause problems, but if anyone gives you trouble, you come tell me or Caleb immediately. We don't put up with that kind of thing. Understand? Ball Abdasan. Lila nodded slowly. Good. Now, you'll take your meals with me and Molly, that's Caleb's daughter, in the kitchen mostly, though sometimes we all eat together in the dining room. Your work will be a mix of things. Helping me in the house, doing laundry, probably helping with the garden, maybe some ranch work if you're interested and capable. We'll figure it out as we go. You'll have Sundays mostly free, and you'll get your wages quarterly just like the contract says. Caleb keeps his word about things like that. Okay, Lila said quietly. One more thing. Rosa leaned forward, her eyes serious. Whatever happened to you before you got here, that's over now. You're safe here. I know you probably don't believe that yet, and that's fine. Trust has to be earned. But I'm telling you the truth, and eventually you'll see it for yourself. Lila's eyes welled up suddenly, and she looked away, blinking hard. Rosa reached across the table and patted her hand gently. It's all right to cry, honey. You've earned it. But you're going to be all right. I promise you that. Before Lila could respond, a small whirlwind burst into the kitchen. A little girl with blonde braids and her father's blue eyes, wearing a dress that had clearly seen some rough play. Rosa! Papa's back and he brought someone! Molly stopped short when she saw Lila, her eyes going wide. Oh, hello. Are you the new person? Papa didn't say you'd be here today. I'm Molly. I'm 7 3/4. What's your name? Molly, breathe, Rosa said with fond exasperation. This is Lila. She's going to be working here and living with us. And before you ask a million questions, give her some space. She's had a long day. Okay, Molly said, but she was practically vibrating with curiosity. Do you like horses? I have a pony named Buttons. Do you want to meet him? He's really nice. Do you know how to ride? Rosa's teaching me, but I'm not very good yet. Do you... Molly. Right, space. Sorry. But Molly sat down at the table anyway, chin in her hands, staring at Lila with open fascination. Despite everything, Lila felt the tiniest hint of a smile. I've never had a pony. Really? Never? That's so sad. You can share Buttons if you want. He likes everyone except when he's being stubborn, which is sometimes. But mostly, he's good. And just like that, Molly launched into a detailed explanation of Button's personality, habits, and opinions on various ranch activities. Rosa caught Lila's eye and gave her a welcome to my world look. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Lila felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Not happiness. That was too much to hope for. But maybe the distant possibility of safety. Maybe the faint outline of something that could, eventually, feel like home. Outside, Caleb leaned against the barn door, watching the house. He could hear Molly's excited chatter even from here, could imagine Rosa trying to wrangle her while making sure Lila didn't bolt like a scared animal. Tom came up beside him. You did a good thing today. Did I? Or did I just make everything more complicated? Can it be both? Caleb laughed, a short, tired sound. Yeah, I guess it can. He pushed off the barn door and headed toward the house. There was still work to be done, always was. But for now, he needed to make sure Lila was settling in all right. And maybe have a talk with Molly about the concept of personal space. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Another day done. Another beginning made. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a girl who'd been treated like property for the first time in her life started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she might actually be worth something as a person. It would take time. It would take trust. It would take patience neither of them knew if they had. But they'd figure it out. They had to. Because sometimes, the only way forward is to take that first step, even when you can't see where it leads. The first night, Lila didn't sleep at all. She lay in the small room Rosa had shown her, clean sheets, a real mattress, a window with actual curtains, and stared at the ceiling, waiting for something bad to happen. It always did eventually. Men made promises they didn't keep. Kindness came with conditions. Safety was just a word people used before they hurt you. She'd learned these lessons young, and they'd been reinforced so many times that they felt like truth carved into bone. The room itself was simple, but more than she'd had in years. A bed, a dresser, a small table with a basin for washing. Rosa had left a lamp burning low, probably sensing that Lila wouldn't want complete darkness. Through the thin walls, she could hear the house settling, the occasional creak of floorboards, the distant sound of men talking outside near the bunkhouse. Somewhere in this same house, Caleb Rowan was sleeping. The man who'd hit her father. The man who'd signed a contract that made her his responsibility for 5 years. The man who'd looked at her bruises with something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. She touched her face gently, feeling the tender spots where Gideon's hand had connected. Her father. She should feel something about leaving him. Grief, guilt, relief. But there was just numbness. He'd stopped being her father a long time ago, probably around the time her mother died, and he discovered that whiskey was easier to live with than a daughter. A soft knock on the door made her freeze. "Lila?" Rosa's voice quiet. "You awake, honey?" She considered pretending to sleep, but something made her answer. "Yes." The door opened a crack and Rosa slipped in, carrying a cup of something that steamed. "Thought you might want some tea. Helps with sleep sometimes." "Thank you." Lila sat up, taking the cup. It was warm against her palms. Rosa perched on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance. "First nights are always hard. New place, new people. It's normal to feel unsettled." "I'm fine. Honey, you don't have to pretend with me. I've seen plenty of scared in my life. I know what it looks like." Lila sipped the tea, chamomile, with honey, and didn't respond. What was there to say? Yes, I'm terrified. Yes, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Yes, I've already mapped out the window as an escape route even though I have nowhere to go. "Caleb's wife, Sarah, she was my sister," Rosa said after a moment. "Did you know that?" Lila shook her head. "She died 7 years ago having Molly. Caleb was destroyed. I thought he might just give up entirely, but he didn't. He had Molly to take care of, and he threw himself into this ranch like a man possessed, built it from nothing into what it is now." Rosa's voice was soft with memory. "I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. Caleb knows what it's like to lose everything. He knows what it feels like when the world takes more than you can afford to give. He's not perfect. No man is. But he's decent. And decent is rare enough that you should recognize it when you see it. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I saw how you looked at him today, like he was a snake that might strike. And I'm telling you, he's not. Give him a chance to prove it." After Rosa left, Lila lay back down and eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep. She dreamed of her mother, not the sick, wasted version from the end, but the strong woman who used to braid her hair and sing while cooking. In the dream, her mother was trying to tell her something important, but the words kept dissolving before Lila could understand them. She woke to dawn light streaming through the window and the sound of roosters crowing. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The ranch, the contract, 5 years. Someone was knocking again. "Lila? Breakfast is ready," Molly's voice bright with morning energy. Lila dragged herself out of bed, splashed water on her face, and tried to make herself presentable. The clothes Mrs. Chen had picked out were plain but sturdy. A simple dress in dark blue, an apron, boots that actually fit. She braided her hair quickly and opened the door. Molly stood there grinning. "Good morning. Did you sleep good? I heard you moving around last night, but Rosa said I shouldn't bother you. But now it's morning, so I can talk to you, right? Come on, breakfast is getting cold, and Papa doesn't like when people are late." She grabbed Lila's hand, the casual touch making Lila flinch, and pulled her toward the kitchen. The house looked different in daylight. Solid, well-built, with signs of life everywhere. Pictures on the walls, a child's drawings, boots by the door, a hat hanging on a peg. A home, not just a house. In the kitchen, Rosa was moving between the stove and the table with practiced efficiency. Caleb sat at the head of the table, a cup of coffee in front of him, reading what looked like a letter. He glanced up when they entered. "Morning," he said, his voice neutral. His eyes flickered over Lila, probably assessing whether she'd survived the night, then return to his letter. "Sit, sit," Rosa urged, placing plates on the table. "We've got eggs, bacon, biscuits. Eat while it's hot." Lila sat across from Caleb, keeping her eyes down. Molly plopped into the chair beside her and immediately started talking about the day's plans. Something about helping feed the chickens, and maybe writing buttons if Papa said it was okay. The food was good. Better than good. Lila tried not to eat too fast, conscious of Caleb's presence across the table. He ate methodically, still reading his letter, occasionally responding to Molly's chatter with a grunt or a word. "So," he said finally, folding the letter and looking at Lila directly. "Rosa's going to show you around today, explain how things work around here. Tomorrow you can start with light duties, helping in the kitchen, maybe the garden, if you're up for it. We'll see how you handle it before adding more." "I can handle anything," Lila said, the words coming out sharper than she intended. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure you can, but you're underweight and recovering from—" He gestured vaguely at her face. "Everything. Pushing too hard too fast helps nobody. We'll build up to the full workload." "I don't need special treatment." "It's not special treatment. It's common sense." His tone was matter-of-fact, not unkind. "You're no good to me if you collapse from exhaustion or malnutrition, so we do this smart." Lila wanted to argue but couldn't find the angle. He wasn't wrong, and fighting him on this seemed pointless. "Fine. Good." He stood, draining the last of his coffee. "I've got work to do. Rosa, make sure she knows where everything is. And Lila—" He paused at the doorway. "If any of the men give you trouble, you tell me immediately. Don't handle it yourself, don't ignore it. You tell me. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Something flickered in his expression at the "sir," but he just nodded and left. Through the window, Lila watched him stride toward the barn, his movements purposeful and controlled. A man who knew exactly what he was doing and didn't waste time second-guessing. "He's always like that in the mornings," Molly said cheerfully. "All business, but he's nicer at dinner. Sometimes he even tells jokes, though they're not very good." "Molly, finish your breakfast," Rosa said, but she was smiling. The morning was spent on a tour of the ranch. Rosa showed her the vegetable garden, the chicken coop, the smokehouse, the root cellar. Explained the daily routines, the weekly schedules, who did what and when. The ranch ran like a well-oiled machine, everyone with their role, everything in its place. Caleb's particular about organization, Rosa explained as they walked past the corrals where several hands were working with horses. "Says chaos in a ranch leads to accidents and lost money, so we keep things orderly." They passed close enough to the corral that Lila could hear the men talking. One of them, a younger cowboy with sandy hair, glanced over and his eyes lingered on her in a way that made her skin crawl. He elbowed the man next to him and said something Lila couldn't hear, but both of them laughed. Rosa's expression hardened. "Hold on." She marched over to the fence. "Jack Brennan, you got something funny to share with the whole ranch?" Jack's smile faded. "No, ma'am. Just talking." "Well, you can talk less and work more. And if I hear you've been bothering Lila here, or spreading rumors or doing anything other than your job, you'll answer to me first and Caleb second. And trust me, you don't want either of those conversations. Clear?" "Yes, ma'am." Jack went back to his work, though Lila caught him shooting another look her way as they walked off. "Don't worry about him," Rosa said. "He's young and stupid. Most of the men here are good people, but there's always one or two who need reminding about manners. They'll learn." But as the day went on, Lila noticed the stares, the whispers, the way conversation stopped when she walked by. She'd expected this. A young woman suddenly appearing on a ranch full of men was bound to cause talk. The question was what kind of talk, and how much trouble it would cause. By midday, she'd met most of the household staff. There was Pedro, the older Mexican man who maintained the grounds and did odd jobs, always friendly with a gold tooth that flashed when he smiled. There was a teenage boy named Sam who helped with the horses and seemed terrified of his own shadow. And there was Tom, Caleb's right-hand man, who regarded her with a guarded expression that suggested he was reserving judgment. Lunch was a simpler affair. Bread, cheese, cold chicken. Caleb didn't join them, apparently eating with the men while they worked on something with the cattle. Molly filled the silence with stories about her lessons. Rosa taught her reading and arithmetic, and her opinions on various animals. Horses were best, chickens were stupid. The barn cat named General was secretly plotting something. "Do you know how to read?" Molly asked suddenly. "Molly, that's rude," Rosa chided. "It's okay," Lila said. "Yes, I can read. My mother taught me when I was young." "Oh, good. Then you can read to me sometime." "Rosa reads to me every night, but sometimes she has to do other things, and then I don't get a story. Will you read to me?" "If your father says it's all right." "He will. Papa likes when people read. He has lots of books in his office." Maybe he'll let you borrow some if you ask nice. The idea of Caleb Rowan, rough rancher with hard hands and a harder expression, having a collection of books was jarring. But then Lila was learning that nothing here was quite what she expected. Afternoon brought actual work. Rosa had her help with laundry, which meant hauling water, heating it, scrubbing clothes, and hanging everything to dry. It was physical labor, the kind Lila was used to, and she threw herself into it with something like relief. Work was familiar. Work had rules. Work didn't require navigating complicated social dynamics or trying to figure out what people wanted from her. "You don't have to do it all in one day," Rosa said at one point, watching Lila scrub a shirt with fierce intensity. "I'm fine." "You keep saying that. Doesn't make it true." Lila paused, her hands red from the hot water and harsh soap. "What do you want me to say? That I'm scared? That I don't know what I'm doing here? That every time someone is nice to me, I'm waiting for them to ask for something in return?" Rosa's expression softened. "I want you to say whatever you're actually feeling instead of pretending everything is fine when we both know it's not. But I know that's asking a lot. So for now, I'll settle for you not working yourself to death on your second day here." They finished the laundry together in silence, then hung it on the lines that stretched between two posts behind the house. The afternoon sun would dry it quickly. In the distance, Lila could see riders moving across the landscape, small figures against the vastness of the territory. One of them broke away from the group and headed toward the house. Even from far away, she recognized Caleb's posture in the saddle. "He'll want coffee," Rosa said. "Come on, I'll show you how he likes it." In the kitchen, Rosa ground beans and showed Lila the precise measurements Caleb preferred. "He's particular about his coffee. Says most people make it either too weak or too bitter. This is how Sarah used to make it, and he hasn't changed since." Caleb came in through the back door a few minutes later, dusty and tired looking. He nodded at them both, hung his hat on a peg, and sat at the table. Rosa poured him a cup, and he took a long drink before speaking. "How'd today go?" "Good," Rosa replied. "Lila's a hard worker. Maybe too hard. Had to stop her from doing 3 days' worth of laundry in one afternoon." Caleb's eyes shifted to Lila. "Pace yourself. This isn't a race." "I know how to work," Lila said, defensive despite herself. "I don't doubt that. But there's a difference between knowing how to work and working smart. You burn yourself out in the first week, you're useless for the next month. I need consistency, not martyrdom." Before Lila could respond, Molly burst in from outside, covered in dirt and grinning. "Papa, you should see what General did. He caught a mouse this big." She spread her hands in wild exaggeration. "And then he brought it to the porch like he wanted to show off." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Now go wash up for dinner." "But Papa—" "Wash up." Molly sighed dramatically, but obeyed, trudging toward the washroom with exaggerated reluctance. Caleb watched her go with a slight smile, the first real softness Lila had seen from him. "She's got your stubbornness," Rosa observed. "She's got Sarah's spirit. The stubborn is all her own." He finished his coffee and stood. "I need to wash up too. Dinner in an hour?" "Yes." After he left, Rosa started preparing dinner. Roasted chicken, potatoes, vegetables from the garden. Lila helped where she could, chopping vegetables and learning Rosa's system. There was a rhythm to it, a comfortable efficiency that spoke of years of practice. "Can I ask you something?" Lila said as they worked. "Course." "Why did he do it? Take me on, I mean. He could have just written off the debt and walked away." Rosa was quiet for a moment, considering. "Because he's seen too much suffering and can't stomach adding to it. Because he has a daughter and knows what it's like to worry about her safety. Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the complicated thing, and he's never been one to take the easy path." She looked at Lila directly. "And maybe because he saw something in you worth saving, even if you don't see it yourself yet." Dinner was a fuller affair. Caleb, Rosa, Molly, and Lila at the table together, with Tom joining them since he'd been working late on something that needed discussing. The conversation flowed around Lila like water around a stone, talk of cattle prices, a fence that needed mending, concerns about drought if the rains didn't come soon. "How many head are we running now?" Tom asked. "Just over 300. Planning to take about 100 to market in 2 months if the prices hold." "That rustling up north worrying you?" Caleb's expression darkened. "Some. Been hearing about it for weeks now. Hasn't hit us yet, but I've got the men doing extra patrols at night just in case." "Rustling?" Lila asked before she could stop herself. Everyone looked at her. She immediately regretted speaking. Cattle thieves, Tom explained. There's been a gang working the territory, hitting smaller ranches mostly. They haven't been bold enough to come after an operation this size yet, but that doesn't mean they won't. Tom's being cautious, which is smart, Caleb said, but we're prepared. Anyone tries to take what's mine, they'll regret it. There was steel in his voice that made Lila believe him absolutely. After dinner, Molly begged Lila to read to her. Caleb gave permission with a nod, and suddenly Lila found herself in Molly's room, smaller than her own but decorated with drawings and a shelf full of wooden toys, reading from a worn copy of a fairy tale collection. Molly listened with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting to ask questions or point out her favorite parts. It was exhausting in a way Lila hadn't expected, but also strangely satisfying. When had anyone last wanted something from her that wasn't soaked in ulterior motive? "You read good," Molly announced when the story ended. "Better than Rosa even, though don't tell her I said that. Your secret is safe. Are you going to live here forever?" The question caught Lila off guard. I'm here for 5 years. After that, I don't know. I hope you stay forever. I like you. And Papa needs someone. Someone for what? I don't know, just someone. He's lonely. Rosa says he doesn't admit it, but I can tell. He gets quiet sometimes and looks sad, even when he's smiling. Do you think he's sad? Lila thought about Caleb's controlled expressions, the way he held himself like a man carrying weight no one else could see. Maybe, but that's not for us to fix. Why not? If someone is sad, you should try to help them be happy. It's more complicated than that. That's what grown-ups always say when they don't want to explain things. Molly wasn't wrong. Lila tucked her in, endured a hug that felt foreign and uncomfortable but not entirely unwelcome, and left the room feeling unsettled in ways she couldn't name. She found Caleb in his office, which was really just a converted corner of the house with a desk, a filing cabinet, and shelves lined with books. He was bent over paperwork, a lamp casting shadows across his face. "She asleep?" he asked without looking up. "Getting there. Thanks for reading to her. She's been excited about that since lunch." Lila lingered in the doorway, unsure if she should leave or speak. Finally, she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "What happens if I can't do this? If I can't handle the work or fit in here or whatever?" Caleb set down his pen and looked at her properly. "You asking if I'm going to send you back to your father?" "I don't know what I'm asking." He leaned back in his chair. "You signed a contract, so did I. That means we both have obligations. Mine is to provide fair work, fair wages, and safe conditions. Yours is to fulfill the labor terms. As long as you're making a genuine effort, we'll make it work. If you're struggling, we adjust. If you need help, we provide it. That's how this operates. And if I run, Why would you run? You have nowhere to go and no money to get there. Running would be stupid." He paused. "But if you did, I'd come looking. Not to hurt you, but because that contract makes you my legal responsibility. If something happened to you out there, it would be on my head. So we'd have a conversation about why you felt the need to run, and we'd figure out a solution that didn't involve you risking your neck in the desert." It wasn't the answer she expected, not a threat, not a dismissal, just practical honesty. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." He picked up his pen again. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll see how you handle morning chores." Lila went to her room and for the second night lay awake staring at the ceiling. But this time the fear was slightly less sharp. The waiting for something bad felt a little less certain. Maybe Rosa was right. Maybe decent did exist, and maybe she was seeing it. The days began to blur into a routine. Wake before dawn, help Rosa with breakfast, clean the kitchen, work in the garden, do laundry, help with dinner, read to Molly, collapse into bed exhausted. The work was hard but manageable, and Lila found herself growing stronger. The bruises faded. Her clothes started to fit better as Rosa's cooking put meat on her bones. The ranch hands remained a mixed group. Some ignored her completely. Some were friendly in a distant way. A few, like Jack Brennan, watched her with eyes that made her uncomfortable. But whenever Jack got too bold with his looks or comments, either Tom or Caleb would materialize nearby, and he'd remember himself. 2 weeks in, Lila was hanging laundry when she heard raised voices from the barn. She recognized Caleb's tone. low and dangerous, and another man's voice, defensive. I was just talking to her. You were making her uncomfortable. There's a difference. She didn't say nothing about it. She shouldn't have to. You should have enough sense to recognize boundaries without having them spelled out. Lila moved closer, staying out of sight. Through the barn door crack, she could see Caleb facing off with Jack, who looked sullen and angry. I didn't mean nothing by it, Jack muttered. Don't care what you meant. Care about what you did. You want to work here, you treat everyone with respect. That includes Lila. She's not here for your entertainment or your speculation. She's here to work, same as you. You can't manage that basic level of decency. You can find employment elsewhere. You can't fire me over this. I can fire you over anything I want. This is my ranch. But I'm giving you a warning instead because Tom says you're a decent hand when you keep your head on straight. So consider this your one chance. Clear? Jack's jaw worked, but he nodded. Clear. Good. Now get back to work. Lila hurried back to the laundry line before they emerged, her heart racing. She'd expected protection. The contract guaranteed it, but she hadn't expected Caleb to be so direct, so absolute. Most men in her experience would laugh off this kind of thing, tell her to toughen up, say boys would be boys. Caleb wasn't most men. That evening, she found him on the porch after dinner, smoking a cigarette and watching the sunset paint the sky. She hesitated, then sat in the chair next to him without asking permission. Thank you, she said. He glanced at her. For what? Jack, I heard you talking to him. Just doing my job. Man can't follow basic rules. He can't work here. Most men wouldn't bother. Then most men are fools. A ranch runs on order and respect. Let that break down and everything falls apart. He took a drag on the cigarette. Besides, I told you I'd protect you. I keep my word about things like that. They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Finally, Lila said, Your wife, what was she like? She thought he might tell her to mind her own business, but he surprised her. Strong, stubborn, too good for me, probably. She could outride most of the men, could shoot better than half of them, and wasn't afraid of hard work. But she was kind, too. Had a way of making you feel like you mattered. Molly says you get sad sometimes. Molly talks too much. She's worried about you. She's 7. She should be worried about whether General is going to catch more mice, not about me. You didn't answer the question. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, I get sad sometimes. Sarah's been gone 7 years, and there are still days when I turn around expecting to see her. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. It just shows up when it wants. He looked at Lila directly. But that's not your concern. You've got enough to deal with without taking on my problems, too. I'm not trying to take them on. I'm just trying to understand. Understand what? You, this place, why you're doing any of this. Because it needed doing, he said simply. Same reason I do most things. He stubbed out the cigarette and stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow Tom's taking some men to check the north fence line, and I want you to go with them. Why? Because you need to learn the property, and because sitting around the house all day will make you crazy eventually. You're strong enough now for some outdoor work. He paused. Unless you'd rather stay here? No, Lila said quickly. I'll go. Good. Tom will look after you, but dress warm. It gets cold in the morning. The next day found Lila on horseback for the first time in years, following Tom and 2 other hands across the ranch's northern section. The men had been skeptical at first, but when Lila proved she could actually ride and wasn't going to slow them down, they relaxed. Tom pointed out landmarks, explained property lines, showed her where the water sources were. The ranch was bigger than she'd imagined, stretching for miles in every direction. It was beautiful in a stark way, all red rock and scrub brush and endless sky. Boss says you're doing all right, Tom said as they rode. I'm trying. More than trying, from what Rosa tells it. You've got a good work ethic. That counts for a lot out here. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did he really do it? Take me on. And don't give me the line about protecting his investment or fulfilling contracts. Tom was quiet for a while, considering. You know what his wife dying did to him? Rosa said it was hard. Hard doesn't cover it. He was a shell for about a year, just going through motions, taking care of Molly because he had to, but there was nothing behind his eyes. Rosa and I, we worried he might just give up entirely, but slowly he came back. Built this ranch into something real. poured all that grief and anger into making something good. Tom looked at her. When he saw what your father was trying to do to you, I think it hit something deep, made him remember what it's like to be powerless. And Caleb Rowan hates feeling powerless. Well, all right, you were, Mom. So I'm what? A project? No, you're a person in a bad situation who needed help. And he was in a position to give it. Not everything has a complicated reason. Sometimes people just do the right thing because they can. They rode in silence after that, checking fence posts and looking for signs of damage or rust. It was peaceful work, and Lila found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't since arriving. On the ride back, they spotted a group of riders in the distance. Tom went tense immediately, one hand dropping to his rifle. What is it? Lila asked. Don't know yet. Could be nothing. Could be trouble. He turned to the other men. Rick, you and James head back to the house. Let the boss know we've got visitors. Lila and I will wait here, see what they want. Rick and James took off at a gallop. Lila's heart hammered as the riders approached. There were 5 of them, rough-looking men with hard faces and well-worn guns. The leader pulled up about 20 feet away. He was older, maybe 50, with a scar running down one side of his face. This Rowan land? It is, Tom said carefully. Can we help you gentlemen with something? Just passing through. Heard this was a good ranch. Thought we might stop by, see if Rowan was hiring. Best to go to the house for that. Boss handles all the hiring decisions. That's so? The man's eyes drifted to Lila, lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. Pretty thing you got there. She come with the ranch? Tom's voice went cold. She's an employee, same as everyone else, and she's none of your concern. Just making conversation. But the man smiled in a way that said he wasn't just making conversation at all. Before things could escalate further, hoofbeats announced more riders. Caleb, with Rick, James, and 3 other hands. He took in the scene at a glance and positioned his horse between Lila and the strangers. You men lost? Caleb's voice was calm but carried an edge. Not lost, just looking for work. We're not hiring. Nearest town is 3 hours east. Try there. Shame. Heard good things about this place. You heard right. Now you can move along. The scarred man studied Caleb for a long moment, something calculating in his eyes. Then he smiled. No offense meant. We'll be going. He tipped his hat in mock courtesy and wheeled his horse around, the other 4 following. They rode off at an easy pace, not hurried, but not lingering either. Caleb watched them until they were out of sight, his expression grim. Everyone back to the house, he ordered. And someone find Pedro. Tell him to make sure all the weapons are accounted for and ready. You think they're trouble? Tom asked. I think 5 armed men don't just wander onto private property to ask about work. And I think that was Silas Whitmore's foreman. The hell is Whitmore's man doing out here? That's what I intend to find out. Caleb looked at Lila. You all right? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Good, let's go. Back at the ranch, Caleb called a meeting with his senior hands. Lila helped Rosa prepare coffee while the men gathered in the main room, their voices low and serious. Whitmore's been trying to buy me out for 2 years, Caleb was saying. Wants to expand his operation, figures my land would be perfect for it. I've turned him down every time. You think he'd resort to intimidation? Tom asked. I think Silas Whitmore is a businessman who doesn't like hearing no. And I think sending his foreman to scope out my property is a message. What kind of message? The kind that says he's not done trying. The meeting broke up with plans for increased patrols and a trip into town to speak with the sheriff. Lila watched from the kitchen doorway as the men dispersed, each going to their tasks with grim purpose. Caleb found her later in the garden, where she was pulling weeds with more force than necessary. Heard you handled yourself well today. I didn't do anything. You didn't panic. That's something. He sat on the garden wall watching her work. I'm sorry you got dragged into that. Those men, they're the kind who don't respect much of anything, including women. I've dealt with worse. I know. Doesn't mean you should have to keep dealing with it. Leela sat back on her heels, looking at him. What's going to happen? With Whitmore, I mean. I don't know yet. But whatever it is, we'll handle it. This ranch has survived worse than one greedy businessman and his thugs. You really believe that? I have to. Built this place from nothing. I'm not letting anyone take it without a fight. He stood, offering her a hand up. Come on. Rosa's making pot roast for dinner, and she gets offended if people are late. Lila took his hand, the first time she'd voluntarily touched him, and let him pull her to her feet. His hand was calloused and warm, and he released her as soon as she was standing. They walked back to the house together as the sun began to set, and for just a moment, Lila let herself believe what Rosa had said, that decent existed, that she might actually be safe here, that maybe, just maybe, the next 5 years wouldn't be survival, but something closer to living. But in the back of her mind, she could still see the scarred man's calculating eyes, could still feel the weight of his stare, and she knew, with the certainty of someone who'd learned to recognize danger early, that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The trouble started small, the way it always does. 3 days after the encounter with Whitmore's men, one of the water troughs in the east pasture was found smashed. Tom called it an accident, maybe a spooked horse. Caleb didn't argue out loud, but Lila saw the way his jaw tightened when he inspected the damage. 2 days after that, a section of fence came down in the night. Could have been the wind, Pedro suggested, though the rest of the fence held just fine. Caleb ordered it repaired and doubled the night patrols. Then the feed storage shed door was found wide open one morning, half the grain spilled across the ground. Sam swore he'd locked it the night before, and Lila believed him. The kid was meticulous about his duties, terrified of making mistakes. "Someone's testing us," Tom said over breakfast, keeping his voice low so Molly wouldn't overhear. "Seeing how we react. Or they're trying to make us paranoid," Caleb replied, but his eyes were hard. "Either way, we don't give them the satisfaction. We stay alert, we stay prepared, and we don't let it interfere with the work." But the tension was getting to everyone. The ranch hands were jumpy, snapping at each other over small things. Rosa's cheerfulness became forced. Even Molly sensed something was wrong, asking why Papa looked so serious all the time. Lila kept her head down and worked. It was what she knew how to do, the only thing that made sense when everything else felt unpredictable. She scrubbed floors until her hands were raw, weeded the garden until her back screamed, helped Rosa with cooking and cleaning and laundry, until exhaustion dragged her under each night. "You're going to work yourself sick," Rosa warned one afternoon, watching Lila beat a rug with unnecessary violence. "I'm fine. Stop saying that when we both know it's not true." Lila paused, the beater hanging loose in her hand. "What do you want me to say? That I'm scared? That every time something happens around here, I'm waiting for someone to decide it's my fault? That I keep thinking if I just work hard enough, maybe I'll be worth the trouble I'm causing?" Rosa's expression softened. "Oh, honey, you're not causing trouble. You're just here, living your life. That's not the same thing. Tell that to whoever's out there making problems. Those problems have nothing to do with you. This is about Caleb and Whitmore and stubborn men playing power games. You're just caught in the middle." But being caught in the middle had never been safe in Lila's experience. Middle meant you got hit from both sides, blamed by everyone, and protected by no one. That night she couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, or maybe she'd just become too aware of every sound. Around midnight, she gave up and went to the kitchen for water. Caleb was already there, sitting at the table in the dark with a glass of whiskey. "Can't sleep either?" he asked without turning around. "No, sir." "Stop calling me sir, makes me feel old." He gestured at the chair across from him. "Sit if you want." Lila hesitated, then sat. Up close, she could see how tired he looked. Lines around his eyes deeper than usual, tension in his shoulders that never fully left. "You think something bad is coming," she said. Not a question. "Yeah." He took a drink. "Question is when and how bad." "What will you do?" "Whatever I have to." He looked at her properly then. "You're scared." "I'm always scared. I've just gotten good at hiding it." "That's a hell of a way to live." "It's the only way I know." Caleb was quiet for a moment, turning the glass in his hands. "When Sarah died, I thought I'd never feel anything again except empty. Took care of Molly because I had to, ran the ranch because it was there. But I was just going through motions, you know? Then one day I woke up and realized I was angry. Furious, actually. At her for dying. At myself for not being able to save her. At the whole damn universe for being so arbitrary and cruel." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because anger is better than fear. Fear makes you small. Anger makes you fight back. I don't want to be angry all the time." "You don't have to be. But a little anger, in the right place, at the right people, That can save your life. Remember that. Before Lila could respond, a sound split the night. Someone shouting, urgent and panicked. Both of them were on their feet instantly. Caleb grabbed his rifle from beside the door and was out before Lila could even process what was happening. She followed him onto the porch and stopped cold. The barn was on fire, not just smoking or smoldering, fully engulfed, flames leaping into the sky, turning night into a hellish orange day. Men were already running from the bunkhouse, some still pulling on boots, all shouting at once. "Get the horses out!" Caleb's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Tom, organize a bucket line from the well. Pedro, wake everyone who's not up yet. Move!" The next hour was chaos and smoke and heat. Lila found herself in the bucket line, passing water hand to hand while the men fought to keep the flames from spreading to the other buildings. The horses were led out one by one, wild-eyed and terrified. The cattle in the nearby pens were bellowing in distress. Through it all, Caleb was everywhere, directing men, pulling burning beams aside with his bare hands, his face black with soot. Tom was right beside him, both of them refusing to stop even as the fire raged. By the time they got it under control, dawn was breaking. The barn was a skeletal ruin, still smoking, the smell of burned wood and hay choking the air. 3 horses had been lost, trapped in their stalls before anyone could reach them. Equipment was destroyed, months of stored feed gone. The men stood around exhausted, faces streaked with ash and sweat. Molly had been kept in the house with Rosa, both of them watching from the windows with terrified expressions. Caleb stood in front of the ruins, his hands blistered and bleeding, his expression carved from stone. Tom approached him carefully. "Boss, we found something." He held up a bottle, the kind used for kerosene, with a rag stuffed in the top. A Molotov cocktail that hadn't quite worked right, kicked aside in the panic. "This wasn't an accident," Tom said unnecessarily. Caleb took the bottle, examined it, then very carefully set it down. When he spoke, his voice was terrifyingly calm. "Get Derek and James. We're riding to town." "What are you going to do?" "Have a conversation with Silas Whitmore, and depending how that goes, possibly with the sheriff." "Caleb, you can't just... Oh! They burned my barn, Tom. Killed my horses. Could have burned the whole ranch down. Could have killed people in their sleep. So, yeah, I can just... And I will." Tom knew better than to argue when Caleb got that tone. He nodded and went to gather the men. Lila approached Caleb carefully. He looked at her and something in his expression shifted. Still angry, but also concerned. "You hurt?" "No, just smoke. You should let Rosa look at your hands. Later." He glanced at the ruined barn. "I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Stay with Molly today. Keep her occupied, keep her calm. Rosa's going to have her hands full managing things here. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good." He started toward the house, then paused. "Lila, if anyone comes to the ranch while I'm gone, anyone you don't know, you take Molly and you hide. There's a root cellar behind the kitchen. You know it?" "Yes." "Go there. Bar the door from inside. Don't come out until you hear my voice, or Tom's. Understand?" The fear in his eyes, quickly masked, told her this was more serious than she'd thought. "I understand." "Good." He went to clean up and change while the men saddled fresh horses. Lila found Molly in the kitchen, pressed against Rosa's side, her eyes red from crying. "Is Papa going to be okay?" Molly asked in a small voice. "He's going to be fine," Lila said, hoping it was true. "He's just going to town to talk to some people." "About the fire?" "About the fire." "Someone did it on purpose, didn't they? I heard the men talking." Lila glanced at Rosa, who nodded permission. "Yes. Someone started it on purpose." "Why would someone do that?" "Because some people are bad. And they do bad things for bad reasons, but your papa is going to make sure they can't do it again." Molly processed this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand an adult world. "Is that man with the scar going to come back?" So she'd seen them that day. Of course she had. Molly noticed everything. "Not if your papa has anything to say about it," Rosa said firmly. "Now, how about we make some bread? I could use an extra pair of hands." Molly allowed herself to be distracted, though her eyes kept drifting to the window where she could see her father preparing to ride out. Caleb left with 4 men, Tom, Derek, James, and Rick. all armed, all with expressions that said they were ready for whatever came. Lila watched from the porch until they disappeared into the distance, a knot of dread tight in her stomach. The morning dragged. Lila helped Rosa clean up the aftermath, soot that had blown into the house, ash tracked across floors, the general disorder of a crisis. Molly helped too, quieter than usual, her small hands working alongside theirs. Around noon, a rider approached. Lila's heart jumped into her throat until she recognized Pedro's nephew, Miguel, who worked on a neighboring ranch. He brought news that the fire had been seen for miles, and that people were already talking in town. "What are they saying?" Rosa asked. "That someone's targeting the Rowan Ranch, that this is the third incident in a week, that Whitmore's name keeps coming up." Miguel shifted uncomfortably. "Some are saying Mr. Rowan better watch his back." After Miguel left, Rosa and Lila exchanged glances. "Should we?" Lila started. "No," Rosa said firmly. "Caleb can handle himself, and he has Tom with him. We stay here and keep things running. That's our job." But as the afternoon wore on with no word, even Rosa's confidence began to fray. She kept looking out windows, kept starting at sounds. When Molly asked for the fourth time when Papa would be home, Rosa finally snapped. "I don't know, sweetheart. When he's done. Now please, just—" She stopped, took a breath. "I'm sorry. Why don't you go help Lila with the garden?" Outside, Lila and Molly pulled weeds in silence. The air still smelled of smoke. The burned barn stood like a black skeleton against the sky, a constant reminder. "You're scared too," Molly observed. "Yes. But you're pretending you're not. For me. That's what adults do sometimes. It's kind of dumb. If everyone is scared, why pretend? Because sometimes pretending helps, makes things feel more manageable." Molly considered this. "Do you think my papa is scared?" "I think your papa is angry and determined, and he loves you very much. That's more important than being scared or not scared." "Do you love him?" The question caught Lila completely off guard. "What?" "Papa, do you love him?" "Molly, I barely know him. I work for him. Rosa says people don't look at other people the way you and Papa look at each other unless there's something there. Rosa should mind her own business. But do you?" Lila sat back on her heels, trying to figure out how to answer. The truth was, she didn't know. She respected Caleb, was grateful to him, found herself thinking about him more than was probably appropriate for an employer-employee relationship. But love? That required trust she didn't know if she could give anyone. "I think your papa is a good man," she said carefully. "That's all I know right now." Molly seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to weeding. But the question lingered in Lila's mind like smoke that wouldn't clear. They heard the horses before they saw them, hoofbeats at a fast clip, multiple riders. Lila grabbed Molly's hand and pulled her toward the house, her mind already calculating the distance to the root cellar. But then Tom's voice rang out. "It's us! We're back!" Relief flooded through her so intensely she nearly stumbled. Rosa burst from the house and Molly tore free of Lila's grip, running toward her father as he dismounted. Caleb caught her up in his arms despite his injured hands, holding her tight. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm all right. Everything's all right." "You were gone so long." "I know. I'm sorry." He set her down and looked at Rosa and Lila. "Everyone okay here?" "Fine," Rosa said. "What happened?" "Inside. I'll explain inside." They gathered in the kitchen, Caleb, Tom, Rosa, and Lila, with Molly sent to her room despite her protests. Caleb's face was grim as he poured himself coffee with bandaged hands. "We went to Whitmore's office first," he began. "Had a very direct conversation about property damage, arson, and legal consequences. He denied everything, of course. Said he had no idea what I was talking about. Said his men were all accounted for and he had witnesses to prove it." "Lying bastard," Tom muttered. "Obviously. But I couldn't prove it was him, not without more evidence. So I went to the sheriff, filed an official report about the fire, the other incidents, made sure it was all documented." "And?" Rosa prompted. "And the sheriff will look into it." Caleb's tone made it clear what he thought of that promise. But here's the interesting part. While we were at the sheriff's office, who should walk in but Gideon Mercer? Lila went cold. "My father? Drunk as always, making a scene, demanding to know where his daughter was, said I'd kidnapped you, that he was going to press charges, that the contract wasn't legal. Caleb's eyes found hers. Took the sheriff about 5 minutes to shut him down. The contract is legal, filed with the territorial magistrate. He has no claim on you, but the sheriff suggested it might be wise for you to avoid town for a while, until Gideon calms down. He won't calm down, Lila said quietly. Not while he's drinking, and he's always drinking. Then he won't calm down, but that's his problem, not yours. Tom cleared his throat. There's more, boss. Tell them the rest. Caleb's expression darkened further. After we left the sheriff's office, we went to the saloon. Figured we'd ask around, see what people were saying. Bartender was surprisingly talkative once we bought him a drink. Seems Gideon Mercer has been spending a lot of time with some of Whitmore's men lately, drinking together, talking in corners. The implications hit Lila like a fist. You think they're working together? I think Whitmore saw an opportunity. Your father's desperate for money and furious about losing his asset. Whitmore wants me gone. Putting those two things together makes a certain ugly kind of sense. But what would my father even do? He's just a drunk homesteader. A drunk homesteader who knows this ranch's routines because you lived here for weeks before the fire. Who could tell Whitmore's men where we keep supplies, where the night patrols go, where the weak points are? Lila felt sick. I didn't tell him anything. We know that, Rosa said sharply. This isn't your fault. But if he's using information about me, about my being here, then that's on him, not you, Caleb interrupted. You didn't choose your father any more than you chose to be sold to pay his debts. What he does now is his choice and his responsibility. But the guilt sat heavy in Lila's chest anyway. If she hadn't come here, if she'd just found some other way, if she'd been stronger or smarter or anything other than what she was. Stop it, Caleb said, reading her expression. I can see you blaming yourself. Don't. I brought you here. That was my choice. And I'd make it again. Whatever consequences come from that, I'll handle them. That's what I do. We need a plan, Tom said, redirecting. If Whitmore and Mercer are working together, they're not done. The barn was just the first real move. They'll escalate. Already working on it. I've sent word to some friends in the territorial marshal's office. If we can prove Whitmore's behind this, we can get him charged with serious crimes. But that takes time and evidence. In the meantime, we increase security, we stay alert, and we don't give them any easy targets. And if they come here, to the house, then we defend it. This is my land, my home. I'm not surrendering it to thugs and drunks. The discussion continued, plans being made, duties assigned. Lila listened but felt strangely detached, her mind spinning. Her father, working with Whitmore to destroy the one place she'd found safety. It was so petty, so cruel, so completely in character that she wondered why she was even surprised. That night, Caleb ordered everyone to stay in the main house. The single men bedded down in the front room, taking shifts on watch. Rosa and Molly took Rosa's usual bedroom. Lila retreated to her own room, but couldn't even think about sleeping. Around midnight, there was a soft knock. It's me, Caleb's voice. Can I come in? She opened the door. He stood there still in his work clothes, looking exhausted. Just wanted to check on you. I'm fine. You keep saying that, because everyone keeps asking. He almost smiled. Fair point. He leaned against the doorframe. Look, I know this is hard. Having your father involved makes it personal in a way it wasn't before. But I meant what I said earlier. This isn't on you. You wouldn't be in danger if I wasn't here. I'd be in danger anyway. Whitmore has wanted this land for years. He would have found some excuse eventually. You're just convenient timing, not the cause. That's not as comforting as you think it is. Now he did smile, tired but genuine. No, I suppose not. He straightened. Try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard. We need to start rebuilding the barn, and we're already behind on a dozen other things because of this mess. Caleb. She stopped him as he turned to go. Thank you for not sending me away. It would be easier if you did. Easier isn't always better. And I don't abandon people when things get difficult. Thought you'd figured that out by now. After he left, Lila lay down and stared at the ceiling, Molly's question echoing in her mind. Do you love him? She still didn't know the answer, but she was starting to understand that what she felt for Caleb Rowan was more complicated than simple gratitude or respect. More dangerous, too. The next week passed in tense calm. Work continued, the barn ruins were cleared, plans for rebuilding drawn up. No more incidents occurred, which somehow made everyone more nervous rather than less. Waiting for the next shoe to drop was its own special torture. Lila threw herself into work with almost desperate intensity. If she stayed busy enough, she could almost forget the guilt gnawing at her, almost forget that her existence here had brought danger to people who'd shown her nothing but kindness. Rosa finally cornered her in the garden on the 5th day. "All right, enough. Talk to me." "About what?" "About whatever is eating you alive. And don't say nothing, because I've been watching you work yourself into the ground, and it needs to stop." Lila sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I keep thinking I should leave, that if I wasn't here, none of this would be happening." "And where would you go?" "I don't know, somewhere. Anywhere that isn't here putting all of you at risk." "You think Whitmore would suddenly become a good man if you left? You think your father would stop being a drunk? All that would happen is you'd be alone and unprotected, and we'd still have the same problems. So that's not a solution. It's just running away." "Maybe running away is smarter than staying." Rosa grabbed her shoulders, forcing Lila to look at her. "You listen to me. You are not a burden. You are not a curse. You are a young woman who deserves safety and a chance at a decent life. Caleb believes that. I believe that. And it's time you started believing it too." "I don't know how." "Then learn. We'll teach you. But you don't get to give up. Not on this, not on yourself, not on us. Understand?" Lila's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. "Okay, good. Now come inside and have some lunch before you collapse." That evening, as Lila was helping clean up after dinner, Tom burst through the door. "Caleb, riders coming in fast from the south." Everyone moved at once. Caleb grabbed his rifle, the other men their weapons. "Rosa, take the girls to the cellar." "No." Lila's voice surprised even herself. "I'm not hiding anymore." "Lila, if this is about me, I should be here. I'm not a child." Caleb looked like he wanted to argue but didn't have time. "Fine, but you stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Got it?" "Got it." They moved to the porch, weapons ready. In the fading light, Lila could see the riders approaching, 3 of them, coming fast. But as they got closer, one of them raised a hand in what looked like a peaceful gesture. "Hold fire," Caleb ordered. "Let's see what they want." The riders pulled up in the yard and Lila's blood ran cold. One of them was the scarred man from before, Whitmore's foreman. The other 2 were Whitmore himself, a portly man in expensive clothes, and behind him, swaying in his saddle, was Gideon Mercer. "Rowan," Whitmore called out, all false friendliness. "We need to talk." "Then talk." "From right there." Whitmore smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Now, is that any way to greet neighbors? I've come to make you an offer. A generous one. Not interested. You haven't heard it yet. I'm willing to pay fair market value for your land, plus compensation for your recent troubles, plus a little extra for your cooperation." His eyes flickered to Lila. "I understand you've acquired some additional assets. I'm willing to take those off your hands too. Call it a package deal." The silence that followed was deadly. "You're talking about a person," Caleb said, each word measured and cold. "Not an asset, and she's not for sale, neither is my land. So you can take your offer and your thugs and your burned barns, and you can get the hell off my property." Whitmore's smile disappeared. "I'm trying to be reasonable here, Rowan, but my patience has limits. You've got 1 week to reconsider. After that, things are going to get considerably worse for you." "That a threat?" "That's a promise. And if you're thinking about running to the law, remember, I've got friends in high places. You've got a failing ranch and a stolen girl. Who do you think the sheriff is going to believe?" Gideon chose that moment to speak, his words slurred. "That's my daughter you got there, Rowan. You stole her from me. I want her back." "You signed a legal contract," Caleb replied. "She's not yours anymore. She never really was. She's mine until I say different. You can't just take what belongs to—" Whatever else Gideon was going to say was cut off as Whitmore's foreman leaned over and said something sharp. Gideon subsided, sullen and swaying. 1 week, Rowan, Whitmore repeated. "Think about it carefully. A smart man knows when he's beaten." "Then it's a good thing I never claimed to be smart. Now get out." For a long moment, it looked like things might turn violent right there. Hands moved toward guns. muscles tensed. But Whitmore wasn't stupid enough to start a fight he might not win. Not yet. 1 week, he said again, then wheeled his horse around. The other two followed, Gideon barely managing to stay in his saddle. After they left, nobody moved for a long moment. Then Caleb lowered his rifle and let out a breath. Well, now we know where we stand. That was a declaration of war, Tom said. Yeah, it was. Caleb looked at his men. Anyone who wants to leave, now's the time. I won't hold it against you. This is going to get ugly. Nobody moved. All right then, we've got a week to prepare. Let's use it wisely. Inside, Rosa poured whiskey for everyone who wanted it. Lila's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her cup. Molly had been sent to bed early, blessedly unaware of how bad things had just gotten. He called you an asset, Rosa said quietly to Lila, like you were a horse or a piece of furniture. That's how he sees people, Caleb replied. Everything's property to men like Whitmore, property to be bought, sold, or destroyed depending on convenience. What are we going to do? Lila asked. We're going to prove he's behind the fire and the other incidents. We're going to get the territorial marshal involved. And we're going to make it very clear that this ranch is not for sale at any price. He looked at Lila directly. And you're staying right here. I know you're thinking about leaving again, thinking it would make things easier, but it wouldn't. This isn't about you, not really. You're just another piece on Whitmore's board. He'd find another angle even if you were gone. But your father made his choices. He chose the bottle over you, chose Whitmore's money over any shred of decency he might have had left. That's on him. You're here, you're under my protection, and that's where you're staying. We clear? Lila nodded, not trusting her voice. The week that followed was the longest of Lila's life. Every sound made her jump. Every rider in the distance could be trouble. They all slept lightly when they slept at all, weapons close at hand, waiting for whatever was coming. Caleb sent messages to the territorial marshal, to friendly ranchers, to anyone who might help. But help was far away and Whitmore's deadline was approaching fast. 3 days before the deadline, Pedro came running from the south pasture. Boss, you need to see this. They found 2 of their best breeding cattle dead, throats cut, left to rot. A message. 2 days before the deadline, someone took shots at Tom and Derek while they were checking the eastern fence line. Nobody was hit, but the intent was clear. The night before the deadline, Lila couldn't sleep at all. She sat in the kitchen in the dark, trying to figure out if there was anything she could do, any way to fix this mess. Around 2 in the morning, Caleb joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. Nope. He sat across from her, sliding 1 cup her way. Been going over plans, contingencies, trying to think 3 steps ahead of Whitmore. What do you think he'll do? Something dramatic, something designed to break us. The question is what and when. They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Lila said, I'm sorry. For what? For all of this. For being here. For bringing this trouble to your door. For... Stop. His voice was firm, but not unkind. I'm going to say this one more time, and then I want you to actually hear it. This is not your fault. You didn't ask for any of this. You didn't choose your father, didn't choose to be used as collateral, didn't choose to be dragged into Whitmore's games. The only thing you chose was to survive. That's not something to apologize for. Then why do I feel so guilty? Because you're a decent person and decent people feel responsible even when they shouldn't. But guilt without cause is just another kind of prison. Don't let them put you in that one too. Lila looked at him across the table. This man who'd pulled her out of hell, who'd defended her without asking for anything in return, who'd stood up to threats and violence rather than take the easy way out. And she realized Molly's question had an answer after all. Caleb, she started, then stopped, not sure how to say it. What? Before she could answer, the sound of breaking glass came from somewhere in the house. Then smoke. Then Molly's scream. Fire! Rosa's voice, panicked. The house is on fire! And just like that, the week of waiting ended, and the nightmare began. Caleb was moving before Lila could even stand, rifle in hand, already heading for the stairs. Smoke was pouring from the back hallway, thick and black. Through it, Rosa appeared clutching Molly, both of them coughing. Someone threw something through the window, Rosa gasped. Back bedroom's already going up. Everyone out now, Caleb ordered. Lila, take them to the front porch. Rosa, grab what you can carry. We don't have much time. The men from the bunkhouse were already running toward the house, some with buckets, others with guns. Tom reached the porch first, his face grim. It's not just the house, boss. They hit the bunkhouse, too. And I can see flames near the equipment shed. How many fires? At least 4 that I can see. This is coordinated. Caleb's expression went cold and hard. Then they're still here. Fan out. Find them. I want whoever did this alive if possible, dead if necessary. The men scattered into the darkness while Caleb and a few others fought the fire spreading through the house. Lila stood with Rosa and Molly on the porch, feeling utterly useless. Molly was crying, clinging to Rosa, and all Lila could do was watch as the home that had become her sanctuary burned. My drawings, Molly sobbed. All my drawings are in there. We'll make new ones, Rosa said, her voice shaking. It's all right, sweet girl. We're all safe. That's what matters. But was it? Lila scanned the darkness, seeing figures moving between buildings, hearing shouts and the crack of gunfire in the distance. This wasn't just arson anymore. This was war. A figure emerged from the smoke near the barn ruins, Derek, supporting James, who was bleeding from his shoulder. They shot him, Derek panted as they reached the porch. 3 men, maybe 4, near the corral. We got one of them, but the others scattered. How bad? Lila asked, moving to help. Went through clean, I think, James said through gritted teeth. Hurts like hell, but I'll live. Rosa immediately went into action, tearing strips from her apron to bind the wound. Get him inside. No, wait, we can't go inside. Lila, there's medical supplies in the root cellar. Go get them quickly. Lila ran, her heart hammering. The root cellar was around back, which meant going toward the fire. She kept low, trying not to breathe the smoke that was everywhere now. Behind her, she could hear Caleb shouting orders, the sound of water being thrown, wood cracking as the fire consumed it. She yanked open the cellar door and descended into darkness, fumbling for the supplies Rosa kept down here. Her hands closed on the medical kit just as she heard footsteps above. Check around back, a voice said, not one of their men. Boss wants to make sure they can't save nothing. Lila froze, barely breathing. 2 sets of footsteps moving around the cellar door. If they looked down, if they saw it was open. We should get out of here. Rowan's got more men than Whitmore said. This is going to hell fast. Just do what we're paid for. Light it up and go. There was the sound of liquid splashing, the sharp smell of kerosene. They were going to burn the cellar, with her in it. Lila didn't think, just moved. She burst out of the cellar with the medical kit, surprising both men. One of them swung at her with a torch, and she ducked, feeling the heat pass over her head. Then she was running, the men shouting behind her. She didn't get far before running straight into Tom, who grabbed her and shoved her behind him. Stay down! The 2 men skidded to a halt, seeing Tom's rifle pointed at them. For a moment, everyone was still. Then one of the men went for his gun. Tom fired once. The man went down. The other one raised his hands immediately. Don't shoot! I surrender! On your knees, Tom ordered. Hands behind your head. Move wrong, and you're dead. Within minutes, the man was trussed up and being guarded by Rick, while Tom checked on Lila. You hurt? No, scared but not hurt. Good. Get that kit to Rosa, then stay with the women. This isn't over yet. But it was close to over. As dawn broke, they'd managed to contain most of the fires, though the house was badly damaged and the equipment shed was a total loss. They'd captured 3 of Whitmore's men, and another had been killed trying to escape. The rest had fled into the desert. The captured men were tied up in the yard, while Caleb stood over them, his face blackened with soot, his hand still bandaged from the last fire. He looked like something carved from rage and exhaustion. Talk, he said flatly to the one who seemed least injured. The man spat blood. We don't know nothing. Wrong answer. Caleb knelt down so they were eye to eye. Let me explain how this works. The territorial marshal is already on his way. I sent for him 3 days ago. When he gets here, you're all going to hang for arson and attempted murder. That's already decided. The only question is whether you take Whitmore and Mercer down with you, or whether you protect them and die alone. So I'll ask again. Who paid you? Who gave the orders? The man's eyes flickered with fear. Whitmore will kill us if we talk. The territory will hang you if you don't. Pick your death. There was a long silence. Then the man's shoulders sagged. It was Whitmore. Paid us to burn you out, scare you into selling, said to make it look random at first, then hit hard if you didn't break. The drunk, Mercer, he told us the layout when the patrols went by, where to hit, said to make it look like an accident. Did Whitmore order you to hurt anyone? The man hesitated. Said to avoid killing if possible, but not to let that stop us if it came to it. This is Arizona territory, he said. People die in fires all the time. Caleb stood up, his expression unreadable. Tom, keep them secured. When the marshal arrives, make sure he hears every word. I'm going to town. Boss, you should rest. I'm going to town, Caleb repeated, his voice like iron. And I'm going to have a final conversation with Silas Whitmore. Anyone wants to come with me, you're welcome. Anyone wants to stay and protect what's left, I understand that too. Every man chose to come. Even James, injured shoulder and all, insisted on riding. Lila watched them prepare. Her stomach knotted with worry. He's going to do something stupid, she said to Rosa. He's going to do what needs doing, Rosa corrected. There's a difference. But what if nothing? That man has survived worse than Silas Whitmore. He'll come back. He always does. Before they left, Caleb came to where Lila stood with Molly and Rosa. His eyes met Lila's and something passed between them, unspoken but understood. Keep them safe, he said to Rosa. Always do. To Molly, he knelt down. I'll be back before you know it, sweetheart. You stay with Rosa and Lila, and you be brave for me, okay? Okay, Papa. Molly threw her arms around his neck. But you be careful, please. Always am. He stood and looked at Lila one more time. If things go wrong, they won't. But if they do, that contract is in the safe in my office. You take it and you burn it. You're free, understand? You don't owe anybody anything. Lila's throat was too tight to speak. She just nodded. Then they were gone, riding hard toward town, leaving behind 3 terrified women and a ranch that looked like a battlefield. The wait was agony. Rosa tried to keep busy, salvaging what could be saved from the house, organizing the cleanup. Molly clung close, unusually quiet. Lila moved through the motions, but her mind was elsewhere, imagining every terrible scenario. Around noon, a wagon approached. For a heart-stopping moment, Lila thought it might be more trouble. But as it got closer, she recognized Mrs. Chen from the general store, along with several other women from town. We heard what happened, Mrs. Chen said as she climbed down. Brought supplies, food, some clothes. Figured you'd need it. You didn't have to, Rosa started. Rosa Sassen. Of course we did. This is what neighbors do. Mrs. Chen looked around at the damage, her expression hardening. Whitmore's going to pay for this. Everyone knows it was him. The whole town's talking about it. The women set to work, their presence somehow making everything feel more manageable. They brought order to chaos, provided food and comfort, and most importantly, they brought news. The marshal arrived this morning, one woman said. Went straight to Whitmore's office with half the town following to watch. Heard there was quite a scene. What kind of scene? Lila asked. The kind where Whitmore tried to bluster his way out, and the marshal wasn't having it. Had 3 of his men in custody, all singing like canaries. Whitmore was arrested on the spot. So was that drunk Mercer. Relief washed through Lila so intensely she had to sit down. They arrested him? My father? Both of them. Conspiracy, arson, attempted murder. They're being held until the circuit judge comes through, but everyone knows how this ends. Whitmore's done. And your father, the woman trailed off delicately. Will hang, Lila finished. She should feel something about that. Grief, guilt, anything. But all she felt was a distant kind of numbness. Her father had made his choices. This was the consequence. The men returned late in the afternoon, looking exhausted but victorious. Caleb dismounted and Molly ran to him, nearly knocking him over with the force of her hug. It's done, he said to Rosa and Lila. Whitmore and Mercer are in custody. The marshal has enough evidence to charge them both with everything. It's over. Just like that? Rosa asked. Just like that. Well, not really. There'll be a trial, testimony, all that legal mess, but the important part is done. They can't hurt us anymore. That night they ate a simple meal sitting outside since the house was barely habitable. The mood was strange, relief mixed with exhaustion, victory tinged with the knowledge of how close they'd come to losing everything. After dinner, after Molly was settled in a makeshift bed in the one undamaged guest room, Caleb found Lila sitting on what was left of the porch, looking out at the stars. "You all right?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I don't know. I keep thinking I should feel something about my father, about what's going to happen to him. But I don't. Does that make me a bad person?" "Makes you human. He stopped being your father a long time ago. You don't owe him grief just because you share blood." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Caleb said, "I meant what I said this morning about the contract. You're free. You don't have to stay here out of obligation." Lila's heart skipped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the contract was always just a legal formality, a way to protect you and satisfy the debt. But after everything that's happened, after all this," he gestured at the damaged ranch, "I can't in good conscience hold you to it. You've been through enough. If you want to leave, start somewhere fresh where nobody knows your history, I'll give you money, a horse, letters of recommendation, whatever you need." "You're sending me away?" "I'm giving you a choice, real choice, not the kind you had before. You can stay. You can go. Either way, you're free." Lila looked at him, this man who'd never asked anything of her except honest work, who'd protected her when he had no reason to, who'd stood up to threats and violence rather than take the easy way out. And she knew her answer. "I don't want to leave." "You should think about it." "I don't need to think about it. I want to stay. Not because of a contract, not because I owe you, but because this is the first place I've felt like I could breathe in years. Because Molly needs someone, and Rosa needs help, and you—" She stopped, not sure how to finish. "I what?" "You make me feel like I matter, like I'm worth something beyond what I can do or produce, and I don't want to lose that." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Lila, I need to be honest with you about something, okay? When I brought you here, it was about duty, about doing the right thing because it needed doing, but somewhere along the way it became about more than that. You're not just an employee anymore, He struggled for words. "You're someone I care about, someone I think about more than I should, and I need to know if I'm alone in that or if you—" "You're not alone," Lila interrupted. "I feel it too. I don't know what it is exactly or what it means, but I feel it. Good. That's good." He cleared his throat. "But we should be clear about what this is. I'm not asking you to be anything other than what you want to be. If you want to stay as an employee, as a friend, as whatever this might become, that's your choice. I'm not going to pressure you or make you feel obligated. You understand?" "I understand." Lila took a breath, gathering courage. "But for the record, I want to see where this goes. If you do." The smile that crossed Caleb's face was the most genuine she'd ever seen from him. "Yeah, I do." They sat there as the stars wheeled overhead, not touching, not speaking, just existing in the comfortable silence of understanding reached. The next week was chaos of a different kind. The marshal's investigation continued, testimony was gathered, and word spread throughout the territory about Whitmore's fall. The trial was set for 2 months out, when the circuit judge would arrive. In the meantime, there was a ranch to rebuild. The house needed extensive repairs. The equipment shed had to be reconstructed. Fences needed mending, cattle needed tending, and life went on because it always did. True to his word, Caleb took Lila to town 3 days after the arrests. She'd been dreading it, but he insisted. "We're doing this right," he said. "Legal and proper." The magistrate's office was small and cramped, smelling of paper and ink. Magistrate Holloway looked up when they entered, recognition crossing his face. "Mr. Rowan, Miss Mercer, I heard about the troubles. Glad you're both well." "Thank you. We're here about the contract." Holloway pulled out the relevant paperwork, scanning it. "Still has 3.5 years to run. Are you looking to modify the terms?" "I'm looking to dissolve it entirely. Mutual agreement." Holloway's eyebrows rose. "That's unusual. May I ask why?" "Because it served its purpose. The debt is settled as far as I'm concerned. Miss Mercer is free to go or stay as she chooses, without any legal obligation binding her." "Miss Mercer, you agree to this dissolution?" Lila's voice was steady. "I do." "Very well." Holloway pulled out a form and began writing. "I'll need both your signatures, and then the contract will be considered fulfilled and void. Miss Mercer, do you understand that this means you have no legal protection under the indenture terms? Mr. Rowan will no longer be obligated to provide wages, room, or board." "I understand." "And you're certain this is what you want?" I'm certain. The paperwork was signed, stamped, and filed. Just like that, the contract that had defined her life for months was gone. Lila walked out of that office feeling lighter than she had in years. Outside, Caleb turned to her. There's one more place we need to go. They walked to the church at the edge of town, not for religious reasons, but because the town clerk kept his office there. Inside, Caleb requested employment papers. I'd like to officially hire Miss Mercer as a household manager, he said. Fair wage, proper terms, everything legal and documented. The clerk looked between them with barely concealed curiosity, but did as asked. New papers were drawn up, these ones specifying a salary that made Lila's eyes widen, along with terms that were far more generous than the indenture had been. You don't have to do this, she said as they left. I already said I'd stay. I know. But I want it documented that you're staying because you choose to, not because you have to. And I want you paid fairly for the work you do. Rosa gets a salary, Tom gets a salary, you deserve the same. They walked through town together, and Lila noticed people staring, some with curiosity, some with disapproval, some with outright hostility. Small towns never forgot scandal, and her story was the biggest scandal in recent memory. Let them stare, Caleb said quietly. They'll get used to it. And if they don't, that's their problem, not ours. They stopped at the general store to pick up supplies. Mrs. Chen greeted them warmly, pointedly ignoring the other customers' whispers. How's the rebuilding going? She asked. Slowly but surely, Caleb replied. Should have the house livable again in another week or so. Well, if you need anything, you let me know. And Miss Mercer, she turned to Lila with a kind smile. You hold your head up. You've got nothing to be ashamed of. Outside, as they loaded supplies into the wagon, a familiar figure stumbled toward them. For a moment, Lila didn't recognize him. Then she realized it was one of her father's old drinking buddies, a man named Carter. That's her, Carter slurred, pointing at Lila. That's Mercer's girl, the one who got him arrested. Walk away, Caleb said calmly. She's the reason Gideon's gonna hang. Ungrateful little... He didn't get to finish. Caleb had him by the collar, slamming him against the side of the wagon. Listen very carefully. Gideon Mercer is going to hang because he committed crimes. He chose to work with Whitmore. He chose to help burn down my ranch. He chose everything that led him to where he is now. His daughter had nothing to do with any of that. So you can take your blame and your drunk logic and you can shut your mouth. Understood? Carter nodded frantically, and Caleb released him. The man scrambled away, nearly falling in his haste. Several townspeople had witnessed the exchange. Most looked approving. A few still seemed skeptical, but nobody else challenged them. On the ride back to the ranch, Lila was quiet. Finally, she said, Thank you for what you did back there. Don't need to thank me. It's just the truth. Still, not everyone would stand up like that. Then not everyone is worth knowing. Back at the ranch, life continued its steady rhythm. The repairs progressed. Rosa taught Lila more complex cooking. Molly insisted on reading lessons where Lila was the student and Molly the teacher. Tom and the other men gradually accepted that Lila wasn't going anywhere, and their wariness transformed into something like respect. And slowly, carefully, Caleb and Lila began to navigate what they were becoming to each other. It started small. Conversations that lasted longer than necessary. Hands brushing when passing tools or dishes. The way Caleb's eyes would find her across a room. The way Lila's heart would skip when he smiled at her. One evening, about 3 weeks after the dissolution of the contract, Caleb asked her to take a walk with him after dinner. They strolled toward the creek that ran along the southern property line, the sunset painting everything gold and orange. I've been thinking, Caleb said, about what we talked about seeing where this goes. And I think we should do it properly, not rush things, but not ignore them either. I'd like to court you, officially, if you're amenable. Lila smiled. Court me? That's very formal. Well, I'm a formal kind of man, when it matters. Then, yes, I'm amenable. They stopped by the creek, watching the water flow past. Caleb reached out and took her hand, the first deliberate touch between them that wasn't about work or necessity. His hand was warm and calloused and steady. I know this is complicated, he said. Me being your employer, the history of how we met, all of it. I know people will talk and judge and make assumptions. If that's going to be too much, it's not, Lila interrupted. I've survived worse than gossip, and I'm tired of letting other people's opinions dictate my life. Good. Because I'm tired of it too. He turned to face her fully. I'm going to be honest with you about something else. I haven't felt this way about anyone since Sarah died. Wasn't sure I could. But you make me want to try. Make me remember what it's like to look forward to something other than just getting through the day. I make you sound like a project. He laughed. Maybe you are. Maybe we're both projects. Two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole again. That's terribly romantic, Lila said dryly, but she was smiling. Yeah, well, I never claimed to be good at this part. He squeezed her hand gently. But I'm willing to try if you are. I am. They stood there as the sun finished setting, hands clasped, watching the sky turn from gold to purple to deep blue. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it felt like possibility. Like the beginning of something that might actually last. The trial came 2 months later, just as the worst of the summer heat was settling in. The whole ranch made the trip to town to testify. Molly stayed with Mrs. Chen, deemed too young to hear the details. The courtroom was packed. Everyone wanted to see Silas Whitmore brought down. The man who'd terrorized smaller ranchers for years, who'd bought his way out of trouble time and again, finally facing real consequences. The evidence was damning. The captured men testified about Whitmore's orders. Bank records showed payments that lined up suspiciously with each incident. And Gideon Mercer, in a last desperate bid for leniency, confirmed everything: how Whitmore had recruited him, what information he'd provided, how they'd planned each attack. Lila had to testify too, explaining the original debt, the contract, how her father had worked with Whitmore. It was humiliating, laying her story out for strangers to judge. But Caleb sat in the front row the entire time, his presence a steady anchor. When it was his turn, Caleb was concise and devastating. He outlined every incident, every threat, every piece of damage. When Whitmore's lawyer tried to suggest Caleb had provoked the attacks by refusing to sell, Caleb's response was cold. I'm not obligated to sell my property to anyone. That's not provocation, that's rights. Mr. Whitmore chose to respond to a legal refusal with arson and attempted murder. That's not a business dispute, that's criminal violence. The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict came back in under an hour. Guilty on all counts for Silas Whitmore. Guilty for Gideon Mercer. Guilty for the 3 captured men. Sentencing was immediate. Whitmore got 15 years in the territorial prison. The 3 men got 10 years each, and Gideon Mercer, for his role in attempted murder and arson that had killed livestock and endangered lives, was sentenced to hang. Lila felt nothing when the sentence was read. She'd thought she might feel grief or guilt or something. But there was just a hollow kind of relief. It was over. Finally, completely over. Outside the courthouse, townspeople congratulated Caleb, offered condolences to Lila, and generally treated the verdict like a victory for justice. Which it was, she supposed. But it didn't feel victorious, it just felt finished. That night, back at the ranch, Rosa made a special dinner. They ate together. The household that had survived fire and threats and violence and come out the other side intact. To getting through it, Tom said, raising his glass. To better days ahead, Rosa added. To family, Molly said, looking around the table with innocent certainty. They all drank to that. Later, after Molly was asleep and Rosa had retired, Caleb and Lila found themselves back on the porch. The house repairs were finally complete. The new barn was half built, and life was slowly returning to normal, or what passed for normal anyway. Your father's execution is set for next month, Caleb said quietly. You don't have to go. Nobody would expect you to. I know. Lila stared out at the darkness. I don't think I will. He stopped being my father a long time ago. Watching him die won't change anything. No, I suppose it won't. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lila said, When I was a girl before my mother died, she used to tell me that life was about choices, that we couldn't control what happened to us, but we could control how we responded. I didn't understand what she meant then. And now? Now I think I'm starting to. Everything that happened, my father, the debt, being brought here, none of that was my choice. But staying here, building something new, letting myself care about people again, that is, and I choose this. I choose you, this place, This life we're building. I just wanted you to know that. Caleb reached over and took her hand. I choose it too. Choose you. All of it. Good, Lila said softly. That's good. They sat there under the stars, hands clasped, two people who'd survived more than most, and come out the other side still capable of hope. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a real one. And sometimes that was enough. The seasons turned the way they always did in Arizona, summer's brutal heat giving way to fall's brief mercy, then winter's cold clarity. Time moved forward because it had no other choice, pulling everyone along with it. The new barn went up beam by beam, stronger than the first one. Caleb insisted on that, stronger, better, built to last. 3 months after the trial, Rosa found Lila in the kitchen staring at nothing, a half-peeled potato forgotten in her hand. You all right, honey? Lila blinked. They hanged him yesterday. My father. Someone mentioned it in town. Rosa set down her own work and came around the table. How do you feel? I don't know. Empty, maybe? I keep thinking I should feel something more. Relief or grief or anger. But there's just nothing. Does that make me terrible? Makes you human. He hurt you for years, then tried to destroy the one good thing you'd found. You don't owe him grief just because he's dead. Rosa's voice was gentle, but firm. You're allowed to just let him go, Lila. The dead don't need our pain. They're done with all that. It's the living who have to figure out what comes next. What came next was complicated in the way that real life always was. Caleb's courtship was sincere but awkward. He'd been out of practice for 7 years, and it showed. He brought her wildflowers that made her sneeze. He attempted to cook her dinner and nearly burned down what was left of the kitchen. I'm bad at this, he admitted one evening. You are, Lila agreed, then softened it with a smile. But you're trying. That counts for more than you think. Molly had no patience for her father's fumbling. One morning at breakfast, she announced loudly, Papa, if you like Lila, you should just kiss her and be done with it. All this staring at each other is boring. Rosa choked on her coffee. Caleb went red. Lila suddenly found her eggs fascinating. Molly, that's not... We don't just... It's more complicated than that, Caleb stammered. Why? You like her. She likes you. I like her. So what's complicated? Later, Caleb found Lila in the garden. He sat beside her, both of them looking anywhere but at each other. We are being silly, aren't we? Lila said finally. Dancing around this thing between us like we're afraid to name it. I'm not afraid to name it. I'm afraid of messing it up, of moving too fast and scaring you off, of... Lila kissed him. It was quick and slightly off-center and tasted like morning coffee, but it shut him up, which was the point. When she pulled back, Caleb looked stunned. Oh, there. Now we don't have to dance around it anymore. I know what I want, Caleb. I want this. Want you. Want to build something real here. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise because I'm scared. A slow smile spread across his face. When did you get so bold? When I realized life's too short to waste on being careful. If I'm going to build a life, I want it to be one I actually choose, not one I settle for out of fear. Then choose this. Caleb took her hand. Choose me. Choose us. Choose all of it. I already did, the moment I decided to stay. The courtship continued more honestly after that. They took walks in the evening talking about everything and nothing. Caleb taught her to shoot. Lila taught him songs her mother used to sing, watching his face soften with memory. Does it bother you, she asked one night, that I'm not her? I wouldn't want you to be her. Sarah was my past. You're my present, maybe my future. They're not the same thing, and they shouldn't be. Caleb's voice was thoughtful. I'll always love her. She gave me Molly, gave me the foundation that became this ranch. But she's gone, and I'm still here. And I've learned that you can love someone you lost without that love consuming your whole life. There's room for more than one kind of love in a heart, if you let there be. Winter came hard that year. Christmas approached, and they decorated a scraggly pine tree with strings of popcorn and paper stars Molly had colored. On Christmas morning, Lila opened her present from Caleb to find a leather-bound journal, blank pages waiting to be filled. For your thoughts, he said quietly, or stories, or whatever you want to put in there. Your mother taught you to read and write. Seems like those are gifts worth using. She gave him a shirt she'd sewn herself. It wasn't perfect, Her stitching was uneven in places, but when he declared it the finest shirt he'd ever owned, she knew he meant it. As January turned to February, Caleb made his decision. One evening after Molly was asleep, he asked Lila to come to his office. She found him at his desk, looking nervous. "I have something I need to say, and I'm going to say it badly, so just bear with me." He stood, pacing. "We've been doing this, us, for months now, and every day I'm more certain that this is what I want. You, here, as part of my life, not as an employee or anything temporary, as my partner, my wife, if you'll have me." He pulled out a simple gold band. "It was my mother's. If you'd rather have something else." "It's perfect," Lila interrupted. "But I need to ask you something first. Are you asking because you love me or because it's practical?" Caleb looked at her directly. "I'm asking because somewhere between that first terrible day and now, I fell in love with you. You're brave and strong and stubborn as hell. You make me laugh. You make me want to be better than I am. And yeah, the practical stuff matters too. I won't lie about that. But I could hire help for practical stuff. I can't hire someone to make me feel alive again. That's just you." Tears were sliding down Lila's face. "I love you too. I didn't think I could, but I do. So yes, I'll marry you." He slid the ring on her finger and kissed her properly, a promise and a question and an answer all at once. They told Molly the next morning. Her reaction was to scream "finally" so loudly that Rosa came running with a pan, ready to fight whatever was attacking. "Can I call Lila Mama?" Molly asked seriously. Lila knelt down. "If that's what you want, then yes, I'd be honored." Molly threw her arms around Lila's neck. "I always wanted a mama. This is better because I get to remember you." The wedding was planned for spring. Word spread quickly through town. Some offered genuine congratulations. Others whispered about the scandalous speed of it. One afternoon, Lila overheard two ranch wives at the general store. "It's inappropriate. The power imbalance alone." He freed her from the contract before proposing. She had a choice. Did she, though? Where else was she going to go? That night, Lila brought it up with Caleb. "Do you think they're right? That this isn't really a choice because I'm dependent on you?" Caleb took her hands. "You could leave tomorrow. I'd give you money, a horse, letters of recommendation. You could build a life somewhere else. Would it be easy? No. But it would be possible. You're choosing to stay not because you have to, but because you want to. If you're uncertain, we can wait." "I don't want to wait. I just wish I could silence the voices that say this isn't real. The town can think what it wants, but you get to decide what you believe about yourself, about us, about this choice you're making. This is two people who survived hell choosing to build something better. That's all it needs to be." The wedding day dawned clear and bright in late March. The ceremony was held outside, under the open sky. Rosa had given Lila Sarah's wedding dress, simple but beautiful, cream-colored with delicate embroidery. "Sarah would have wanted you to have it," Rosa had said. "You're becoming part of this family in your own right." When it came time for the vows, Caleb spoke first. "I promise to honor you, protect you, and stand beside you. I promise to build this life with you, not for you. I promise to love you even when you're difficult, which will be often, because you're stubborn as a mule." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "I promise to remember that you chose this, chose me, chose us. And I promise never to take that choice for granted. I promise that when the world is hard, we'll face it together. That's what marriage is, facing everything together and refusing to let it break us." Lila's voice shook at first but grew stronger. "I promise to be honest with you, even when the truth is uncomfortable. I promise to love Molly as my own. I promise to trust you, even when my past tells me not to trust anyone. I promise to stay, not because I have to, but because I want to. And I promise that whatever comes, joy or sorrow, plenty or want, we'll face it together. Because you taught me what together means. And I'm not letting go of that." Magistrate Holloway pronounced them married, and Caleb kissed her as the crowd cheered. Molly threw flower petals with such enthusiasm that several people got hit in the face. The barn cat stalked through with a dead mouse, causing ladies to shriek. It was imperfect and chaotic and utterly real, which made it perfect. As the sun set and the celebration continued, Caleb and Lila found a quiet moment on the porch. "This is real, isn't it?" Lila said quietly. "This life we're building. As real as it gets." Molly ran up, breathless. Mama? Papa? Come dance with me. They danced together, the three of them, while the music played and the stars came out. Life settled into new rhythms. There were hard days, when work was overwhelming, money was tight, Molly was difficult, or Lila's past haunted her nightmares. But there were more good days than bad. Days when Molly learned a new word, days when profits rolled in, days when Caleb looked at her with such love she forgot to breathe. One evening in late summer, almost a year after their wedding, Lila sat in the garden. Caleb found her there. What are you thinking about? How far we've come, how different everything is from that first day. You know what I was thinking that day? That I had no idea what I was doing, that I was taking on a responsibility I wasn't equipped to handle. He sat beside her. Now I know it was the best decision I ever made. You saved me as much as I saved you. I don't think I saved you. You did. I was just going through motions before. You reminded me what it was like to feel something, to want something beyond just getting through the day. After a moment, Lila said, I'm pregnant. Caleb went very still. You're sure? Rosa helped me figure it out, about 6 weeks along. And you're happy about it? Terrified, but yes, happy. Are you? Caleb pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. Yeah, scared as hell, but happy. Molly's reaction was to immediately start planning all the things she'd teach the baby. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. A son was born during a snowstorm in February with powerful lungs and his father's blue eyes. They named him James. Molly was entranced, reporting his every move like breaking news. And Caleb held his son with a gentleness that made Lila fall in love with him all over again. Thank you, he said one night, the baby asleep against his chest. For this. For choosing to build this family with me. You don't have to thank me for choosing something I want. The years that followed brought challenges. Drought, harsh winters, Molly's teenage years, James growing up wild. But through it all, they held together. They'd learned early that the only way to survive hard times was to face them together. One evening, almost 10 years after that first terrible day, Lila stood on the porch watching the sunset. Molly was 17 now, teaching James to ride. Rosa was in the kitchen. Everything was exactly as it should be. Caleb wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? How strange life is. How one terrible thing led to all of this. If my father hadn't been a drunk, if he hadn't owed you money, none of this would exist. That's surprisingly philosophical for a woman who spent the day wrestling a goat out of the vegetable garden. Lila laughed. That goat is demon-possessed, and you know it. They stood together watching Molly teach James, seeing the love and patience she showed. The girl who'd once been desperate for a mother had become an amazing big sister. The man who'd lost his first wife had found love again. The young woman who'd been sold like property had become a partner in every sense. I love you, Lila said. I love you too. Molly's voice rang out. Mama, Papa, come see. James did it. And they went because that's what family did. They showed up. They celebrated victories. They weathered storms together. They chose each other over and over in ways big and small. Years later, when Lila was old and gray, when Molly had children of her own, and James was running the ranch, someone asked her what the secret was, how they'd built something that lasted. She thought for a moment, then said, We never pretended it would be easy. We never pretended we were perfect. We just promised to keep choosing each other, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Because love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every single day. And we chose each other. That's all it took. On a warm spring evening, not long before the end, Caleb and Lila sat on that same porch where so much of their life had unfolded. The ranch sprawled around them, strong and prosperous. Their children and grandchildren were inside, voices carrying through the windows. You ever regret it? Caleb asked. That I came to collect that debt? Lila thought honestly. I regret what he put me through, but I don't regret where it led. Can't regret the life we built, even if the path to it was ugly. That's the thing about paths. They don't have to be pretty to take you somewhere good. She laughed and took his hand, still calloused after all these years, still steady, still home. Yeah, it can be both. And whenever the wind swept across the desert after that, carrying memories of everything that had been and everything that was, Caleb would smile and sometimes say the words that had changed everything. Come with me. And Lila, no longer a girl who was ever for sale, no longer afraid, no longer anything but exactly who she'd chosen to become, would always answer the same way. I already did. Because that was the truth of it. She'd chosen and kept choosing, and in the choosing found the freedom that no contract could grant and no circumstance could take away. In the end, that's all any of us can do. Choose who we love, choose what we build, choose how we face the world. The rest is just details. And their choice? It was the one that mattered most.